She raised her glass in front of everyone and declared, "My body, my rules. I don't owe it to anyone, not even my husband." A week later, I found photos, her checking into a hotel with her friend's husband. And you know what she said when I showed her the pictures? Not "I'm sorry." Not "I made a mistake." She said, "You were following me?" That's disgusting. She wasn't ashamed of the affair. She was ashamed of being caught. Before we start, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I still remember the weight of her elbow against my chest, sharp, dismissive, like I was some stranger brushing too close on a crowded subway. We were in our friend's living room, one of those Saturday night gatherings where the music was mellow, the drinks were flowing, and conversations floated easily. I had my arm around Rachel. I wasn't even thinking about it. It was instinct, habit. We'd been married nearly 8 years. But the second my arm curled around her waist, she twisted out from under it and let out a grunt. "David, stop," she snapped, not quietly. The air around us froze. I blinked. My smile wavered. I started. "I'm not in the mood for this performance," she muttered under her breath, brushing her dress smooth like I'd wrinkled it. I heard it. So did the people standing near us. I laughed awkwardly, trying to ease the sting, but something in me cracked. I hadn't planned to say it, but I couldn't hold it in anymore. "We haven't had intimacy in months, and that's too damn long," I said, louder than I meant to. Silence. You know the kind of silence that swallows a room? It happened instantly. Every beer bottle mid-sip, every small laugh, paused. A couple on the couch stopped their game of footsie. You could have heard the wine breathing in its glass. Rachel's head snapped toward me like I'd slapped her. Her mouth opened, then closed. Then there it was, the reaction that hurt more than words. She laughed. Not nervously, not apologetically, but mockingly. "Oh, is that what this is about?" she said, eyes wide with performative pity. "Poor David thinks he's owed something. Should we all bow our heads in silence for your neglected needs?" A few uncomfortable chuckles. No one made eye contact. Someone in the corner cleared their throat. "Rachel, don't." I tried again, voice shaking. She turned fully to me now, voice dripping with venom that no one could pretend not to hear. "If I'm being honest, maybe if you spent half as much time connecting with me emotionally as you do pouting about what's not happening physically, you'd have a wife who actually wanted to be close." Gasps, a few murmurs. Our host, Tom, looked like he wanted to crawl into the kitchen cabinets. I felt heat rise up my neck. My hands curled into fists at my sides, not in anger, but in defense, like I needed to brace for impact. Rachel stepped back, like I might embarrass her further. "Let's not ruin the party," she added, lifting her wine and walking away like she hadn't just gutted me in front of a dozen people. Nobody said anything for a few seconds. Then softly, Mark, my oldest friend, someone who'd known Rachel and me since college, muttered under his breath, "That was rough, man." Yeah, rough didn't begin to cover it. The thing is, I'm not some distant husband who forgets anniversaries and leaves dishes in the sink. I'm a partner. I come home at 6 o'clock. I bring flowers on Tuesdays, not just holidays. I ask about her day and actually listen. I thought our life, our middle class, quiet, working hard and loving softly kind of life, was real. Turns out, you can live beside someone for years and still not see the blade coming until it's already between your ribs. But here's the thing. I'm not telling you this because of what happened tonight. No. What's coming? What happens next? That's the part people won't see coming. The ceiling fan spun lazily above me, making the shadows stretch and curl across the room like they were trying to whisper something I'd forgotten to hear. What I felt was disorientation, like I'd woken up in someone else's house and was expected to act like I belonged there. The room was dim, lit only by the hallway lights sneaking in under the door. Her side of the dresser was cluttered with makeup bags, receipts, that perfume bottle she never used anymore. I used to find that chaos endearing. Now it looked like evidence in a case I hadn't realized I was losing. I turned my face toward the ceiling and just let the silence settle over me. When did she stop being mine? Not in the possessive sense. I mean in the soul-sharing, look at you in your home kind of way. It wasn't a single moment. It was erosion, slow, quiet. We still ate dinner. We still took turns walking the dog. We even still said, "love you," on most mornings, like muscle memory. But intimacy, that had died in silence, not fire. I remembered the first time she ever fell asleep in my arms. We were 19. She had one sock on, and this ridiculous, oversized hoodie from my college. I'd never felt so trusted by another human in my life. I held her like I was scared the world would steal her away if I blinked. Tonight, I could have screamed, and she wouldn't have turned to look at me. The irony? If you'd asked anyone at the party tonight who was in the wrong, they'd probably say me. Because I lost my temper. Because I made it public. Because I spoke the truth too loudly. But the truth had been simmering in me for months. 6 months, to be exact. That's how long it had been since we last touched. Not just physically, but with intention, with desire. I tried everything. Conversation, patience, little things like date nights, or making breakfast on her busy mornings. She responded with politeness. Not cruelty, not hostility, just absence. And here we were, 2 people lying inches apart, a canyon between us. No yelling, no tears, just the low hum of a fan and the smell of fabric softener. I turned to look at her again. She didn't stir. There was a time I could read her breathing and know if she was awake. I used to know her like I knew my own hands. Now I had no idea if she was sleeping or just pretending. I whispered into the stillness. Rachel. Nothing. Not even a shift. I waited. Do you hate me? The quiet that followed was worse than a no. I laid back again, letting the weight of that silence press down on me. For the first time since our wedding night, I realized I didn't know what the next morning would bring, or if it would bring us closer, or finally break whatever thread was still holding us together. I stared at the ceiling until my eyes blurred. Somewhere outside, a car door slammed, and a dog barked once. Then nothing. And in that nothingness, the truth whispered again. She was gone. Maybe not physically, not yet. But the woman I married had left quietly. No slamming doors, no suitcase, just a gradual vanishing act, like breath on a mirror. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in months, I didn't dream about her. I dreamed of quiet. David, line 3's been holding for 10 minutes. Wants to confirm the Langston agreement, Lily said. I'll get to it, I said, my voice cracked like a whip across the room. Harsh, loud, unnecessary. Lily froze at my door. The soft clack of her heels halted mid-step, her tablet still raised in her hand. Her mouth opened slightly, but whatever she was going to say disappeared behind a swallowed breath. I immediately looked away, pretending to shuffle through paperwork. I wasn't even reading. Great. Now I was yelling at the one person who actually cared whether I was drowning. Sorry, I muttered without looking up. I've got a lot today. A beat of silence. Then Lily cleared her throat. You've had a lot all week, David. Maybe just delegate something. I looked up sharply. What are you, my therapist? The second it came out, I regretted it. Her face didn't twist or flinch. She just slowly lowered her tablet to her side and gave the smallest nod. No, I'm your assistant trying to assist. Then she turned and walked away without another word. The door didn't slam. It clicked gently shut. Somehow that felt worse. I sat there for a moment, completely still. The phone started ringing again, line 2, this time. Then my email pinged. Another case file update. I could hear the copier jamming in the hallway, followed by Dave from litigation muttering something under his breath. Somewhere behind the wall, someone laughed, a real laugh. One of those deep belly laughs from someone not carrying a storm inside them. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. The office didn't feel like my sanctuary anymore. It felt like a factory. Files in, files out. People asking for decisions. Clients wanting reassurance I no longer had in me to give. Colleagues nodding with that fake professionalism while I slowly unraveled beneath a tie I hadn't loosened in 6 hours. How had I ended up here? On edge, bitter, short with Lily, who'd covered for me more times than I could count. The worst part wasn't that I snapped. It was that I didn't recognize the tone in my own voice when I did. Cold, tired, hollow, like someone else had borrowed my skin for a moment and used it wrong. I reached for the coffee mug beside me and realized my hand was shaking slightly. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about work. Not really. I'd built a whole life around stability, structure, responsibility, logic. But now everything felt cracked, and I was trying to keep the walls from collapsing by pretending everything was still perfectly stacked. But my marriage was bleeding. My house felt like a stranger's Airbnb. And here I was, biting the only people left still standing with me. Something had to give, and it was going to be me. 15 minutes later, I walked into Lily's office. She looked up cautiously. Yes. I scratched the back of my neck. I was out of line. She blinked. That's an understatement. I chuckled lightly. I need a few days, maybe a week. Her brows lifted. You taking time off? Yeah. I think if I don't, I'll burn this place down emotionally. She looked at me for a moment, then softened. Okay, I'll reschedule your week and loop in the partners, but you're checking out completely, no calls. I gave her a nod, slow and sincere. Thank you. Lily nodded back, her eyes kind. Try not to self-destruct while you're off. I'll try, I said, forcing a faint smile. No promises. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled into the clearing. Pine trees swayed above like they were nodding in approval. The lake shimmered in the distance, wind sending little ripples across its surface. Quiet, clean, honest. Mark was already outside the cabin with a beer in hand, wearing that same beat-up baseball cap he'd worn since high school. David, he grinned. Took you long enough. You forget how to escape the city. I stepped out, stretching my legs, breathing in the pine and cold air like medicine. Almost turned back twice. You didn't. That's what counts. He clapped a hand on my shoulder. Come on. You look like a man who needs a drink and a place to break down. I let out a tired laugh. You're not wrong. Inside the cabin, it smelled like cedar and dust. Nothing fancy, just a worn couch, a stone fireplace, 2 creaky beds, and a kitchen with mismatched mugs and a fridge stocked with things men think qualify as meals. Bacon, beer, and eggs. We dropped our bags, cracked open 2 bottles, and sank into the couch. Mark was the kind of friend who didn't press. He waited, and sure enough, after the first drink, it spilled out. You ever get the feeling someone left you a long time ago? I said slowly. But they're still sleeping next to you, just to finish the lease? Mark didn't flinch. Rachel. I nodded. I embarrassed myself in front of everyone last weekend. He took a sip. You didn't embarrass yourself. You just spoke what half the room already saw. I looked over. What do you mean? I mean, Rachel hasn't looked at you like a husband in a long time. She's treated you like background noise. You finally raised the volume that sat heavy between us. You shouted at her, in front of friends. You cracked. You're human, not a damn marble statue. Silence fell. The fire popped once. Then Mark leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. What did she do after you said it? He asked. I stared into the fireplace. Laughed. Said I was making it about myself. Made me feel like I was the problem. Mark nodded slowly. Sounds like someone who's already rewritten the story in her head and cut you out of the plot. I looked down at the bottle in my hand. I thought maybe if I waited long enough, if I stayed steady, she'd come back. But she's not coming back, is she? He didn't answer right away. Then softly, David, she already left. You're just finally catching up to where she went. The wind picked up outside. I heard branches creak like nature itself agreed. We sat like that for a while, 2 childhood friends, now grown men with weathered eyes and broken marriages between them. Eventually, Mark stood. Let's walk. So we did. We walked down the narrow path to the dock, cold air brushing against our faces. The lake stretched out like glass. No noise, no pressure, just stillness. Mark stopped at the edge of the dock. You know what I envy about you? I raised an eyebrow. Envy. He nodded. You still believe in fixing things. You hold on. You care even when it kills you. Doesn't feel like a strength. It is, he said. But it's time you start caring about yourself, too. We stood in silence, watching the water shift. And in that moment, with no emails, no ringing phones, no Rachel, no pretending, I heard my own voice again. Not loud, not angry, just real. And for the first time in a long while, I listened. When I stepped back into the house, it was like walking into a museum. Everything was in its place. Couch cushions straightened, candles untouched, Rachel's keys on the hook by the door. But none of it felt alive. It didn't feel like home, just a space where 2 people existed in parallel, brushing shoulders in hallways like strangers who once knew each other. I set my bag down, exhaled deeply, and listened. No footsteps rushing to greet me. No, how was the drive? Or did you eat on the road? Just the low hum of the fridge and the faint tick of the wall clock. Rachel was in the kitchen, staring into the open fridge. She didn't hear me come in. Hey, I said gently. She didn't turn. Hey. Her tone was casual, dry, like I'd just come back from the store, not from a week away trying to remember who I was. I walked in slowly. Can we talk? That got her attention. She straightened, shut the fridge door, and leaned against the counter. Talk about what? I studied her for a moment. She looked exactly the same. Same oversized sweatshirt, same hair tied up, same cool indifference. But I'd changed, and that made this harder. About us, I said. About what's happening here. Rachel crossed her arms. Okay. I waited for more, but she just stared at me, blank as a blank page. I'm not trying to argue, I began. I'm not looking for an apology or some dramatic moment. I just want to be honest. I've been walking on eggshells for months, pretending not to notice the distance between us. Her expression didn't shift, not even a twitch. I continued, I've tried, really tried, but I'm not feeling like your husband anymore. I feel like someone you're stuck with. Rachel sighed. Is this because of that party? You're still holding on to that? No, I said calmly. That was just the moment everything finally broke loose. This has been happening for a long time. You know that. She rubbed her temples like I was a student asking too many questions. David, I don't want to have this conversation right now. I paused. When would be a good time? She didn't answer, just walked to the sink and started rinsing out a mug that didn't need rinsing. I stepped forward, slower this time. Rachel, look at me. She didn't. I'm asking one last time. Can we talk like two people who used to care about each other? Not as enemies, not as victims, just as people. She kept scrubbing the mug. The sound of ceramic against sponge filled the room. Finally, she spoke, quietly, emotionless. I don't see the point. And that was it. The quiet afterward wasn't even painful, it was clarifying. I nodded slowly. All right. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't beg. Didn't get angry. I just turned and left the kitchen. The hallway felt longer than usual. I passed the pictures still hanging. Our wedding photo, a beach trip from 5 summers ago, a framed quote that once meant something about forever. Now they just felt like decoration from a play that had closed a long time ago. I entered the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at my shoes. For the first time in months, I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't hoping or guessing or clinging to what we used to be. Rachel had said it without saying it. She was done. And I was finally ready to act like it. The next morning, sunlight hit the kitchen tiles in a way that made everything look sharper than it needed to. The kind of brightness that doesn't warm, it just exposes. I was halfway through a piece of toast when Rachel walked in. She didn't say good morning. Didn't ask about my plans. She didn't need to. She had her purse on her shoulder and her phone already in hand. Whatever she came for wasn't conversation. Hey, she said flatly, eyes on her screen. I need the card. I'm going shopping this morning. I chewed slowly, then set the toast down. What for? Rachel blinked. Does it matter? Kind of, I said, keeping my tone level. We've got joint expenses this week. Mortgage, gas, some car maintenance I've been putting off. She scoffed, cutting me off. David, it's clothes, groceries, a few things for the house. Not like I'm buying a yacht. I reached for my wallet, but stopped short. For once, I didn't move on autopilot. I met her eyes. My wallet, my rules. Her head tilted just slightly. Excuse me. I placed the wallet back down beside my coffee mug, slowly, deliberately. I'm not just handing over the card today. Her eyebrows shot up. You're serious? I didn't flinch. Yes. Rachel took a step forward, voice rising. So now you're what? Controlling the money. Are we doing that now? I leaned back in the chair, feeling the weight of this moment settle around us like storm clouds rolling in. I'm setting a boundary. You said last night there's no point in talking. Fine. But that also means I'm not pretending we're still functioning like a team. She blinked hard, stunned silent for just a breath. You're punishing me. No. I said, my voice firmer now. I'm protecting myself. Her mouth twisted into something between a laugh and a snarl. God, you sound so dramatic. Protecting yourself? From what? Me buying almond milk and throw pillows? No. From pretending this marriage still works. That hit. Rachel's eyes flashed with something sharp. Panic, maybe, or fury disguised as disbelief. You really think withholding money makes you some kind of hero? She snapped. You want a medal for standing your ground? I stood now, not towering or threatening, just steady. I don't want anything from you, Rachel. Not anymore. But I'm done being treated like a walking wallet while you live like I don't even exist. She let out a short, bitter laugh. Wow. So now you're the victim? I didn't answer, because I wasn't playing that role anymore either. You know what? She said, reaching into her purse. Keep it. I'll figure it out myself. I'm sure you will, I said quietly. She froze for a second, not expecting that response. Her fingers trembled just a little as she adjusted the strap of her purse. Then she turned, heels clicking hard against the tile as she left the kitchen. The front door opened, then slammed. I stood there for a moment, the echo still ringing in the air. Something had shifted, and not just between us. Inside me. For the first time in years, Rachel didn't get the last word, and I didn't feel guilty about it. If you're still listening, please tap the like button on this video. The next morning, I didn't say a word, not out of spite, not anger, just silence. Rachel passed me in the hallway. She opened her mouth to speak, maybe to repeat the same tension-drenched cycle we'd been stuck in, but I brushed right past her without a glance. No nod, no raised eyebrow, nothing. And that nothing, it landed heavier than any insult could have. I poured my coffee, made a slice of toast, and sat at the table alone. She hovered near the kitchen counter like she wanted to fill the space with some half-hearted noise. But I didn't give her a crack to slip into. I was done performing, done trying. I left the house without saying goodbye. The drive downtown felt blank, like I was floating through my own life behind the wheel, watching familiar streets blur by while the radio hummed low without a station I cared about. When I parked in front of the law office, my hands were steady. I climbed out, buttoned my coat, and walked in like I was going to any routine appointment. Dentist, DMV, not the place where lives are untangled by paperwork and signatures. The office was modern, cold in a clean way. Frosted glass, quiet carpet, a little coffee station in the corner nobody really used. A small plaque on the wall read, "Dignity doesn't need permission." Fitting. The receptionist looked up. I recognized her from their website. Ava, blonde ponytail, maybe 30, bright blue eyes, and a voice like someone who used to sing in high school musicals. Mr. Rhee? Yeah. She smiled kindly. Welcome. You're meeting with Mr. Thorne today, but I'll just grab a few details before we start. She gestured to a chair across from her. I sat, and she opened a slim laptop with a soft click. Is this your first consultation with us? It is. Okay, let's start with the basics. Her fingers flew over the keyboard. Married how long? 8 years. Children? I shook my head. No. Property? Joint house. 1 mortgage? 2 cars, both in your name. I nodded. And the reason for divorce? That question hung in the air a beat too long. I looked at her, the weight of everything catching in my chest like it always did. But not today. Today it settled different. Disconnection, I said plainly. Long term. No effort, no repair. She left emotionally. I'm just catching up. Ava stopped typing for a moment and met my gaze. There was no pity there, just a quiet recognition, like she'd heard that answer more times than she cared to count. I see, she said softly. And today this is just you getting information? I smiled faintly. For the first time in weeks, it didn't feel forced. No, I said. Today is me breathing. She closed the laptop slowly. Then let's make sure you walk out with a clear head and a clear path. I exhaled. The silence around me didn't feel hollow anymore. It felt earned. It was around 9 p.m. when Mark dropped by, no warning, just a soft knock on the door, followed by his voice, low but firm. Open up. I've got something. I pulled the door open and saw him standing there, his hands deep in his coat pockets, his face unreadable. You okay? I asked. He nodded once. Yeah, but you're about to be more than okay. That got my attention. I stepped aside. Come in. He walked in, took off his coat, and held up a manila envelope. Classic move, always the envelope. I didn't reach for it right away. What's this? Mark let out a slow breath. Proof. You wanted clarity, you've got it. He sat at the dining table and slid the envelope across to me. I've been keeping an eye, like you asked. Nothing weird the first couple days, until this afternoon. I finally opened the envelope. Inside, photos. Not blurry, not maybe it's her, crystal clear. Rachel and him, Brent Collier, Jessica's husband. I didn't even blink as I laid them out. A restaurant booth, his hand on her leg, her laughing, head tilted back, hair tucked behind her ear, same move she used to do when she was with me. Another shot outside a boutique hotel, his arm around her waist, her keying in the door code, then gone. I didn't feel rage. I didn't even feel shocked. What I felt was clarity, cold, quiet, pure. It snapped everything into place. Her disinterest, her snide remarks, the growing wall between us. It wasn't random. It wasn't emotional burnout. She just moved on and kept the house key while she did it. Mark sat across from me, waiting. You okay, man? I leaned back slowly in the chair, eyes still on the photos. Better than I've been in weeks. His brow furrowed. That's not the reaction I expected. I looked up at him and gave a small smile. Because now I know. No more guessing. No more asking myself what I did wrong or how I could fix it. He nodded slowly. So what now? Now, I said, folding the photos neatly back into the envelope. I prepare. Mark hesitated before asking. You want the video too? I raised an eyebrow. There's video? Security footage, same hotel. A friend of mine works there. You don't need to watch it unless you want full leverage. I shook my head. I don't need to see anything else. This is enough. He tapped his fingers against the table. You sure? Yeah. I stood and walked to the counter, placing the envelope carefully inside a drawer. The Rachel I married, she's gone. Whoever this version is, she's not my concern anymore. Mark stood to leave, but paused at the door. You want me to keep watching? No, I said calmly. Let her live however she wants. Just not in my house. He gave me a look, a mixture of respect and quiet approval, then nodded. You got it. When the door closed behind him, I stood alone in the hallway for a moment. Strange how the truth didn't hurt as much as the wondering did. The truth? It was a release. And suddenly, I could breathe again. The second I saw the extra cars parked in the driveway, I knew she was staging something again. I pulled into the garage slowly, letting the door hum closed behind me before I even stepped out. There was laughter inside, bright, forced, too loud for how dead the house had felt all week. I walked in through the side door and paused just beyond the kitchen. There they were. Rachel on the bar stool like a queen in court, wine glass dangling from her fingers, and three of her friends encircling her like petals around a bruised flower. Jessica was there, too. Of course she was. And two others I vaguely recognized from past game nights and birthdays where I was treated like furniture. Rachel spotted me, didn't miss a beat. Look who finally crawled out of his cave, she said, voice honey but sharp. Ladies, give a round of applause. Our brooding husband has graced us. One of the women gave a chuckle that didn't reach her eyes. Jessica shifted uncomfortably, sipping her wine. I walked in quietly, set my keys on the counter, and leaned against the fridge. Rachel raised her glass. To independence, she said. To being women who don't owe their bodies to anyone, not even husbands. The women clinked glasses, and the laughter swelled. Rachel smirked at me. We were just talking about expectations. You know how some men think they're entitled to certain things, even after their wife has made it clear. My body, my rules, no intimacy. Another giggle. Another sip. I stayed still calm. I waited until the moment stretched just long enough, until their gazes were almost bored. Then I looked directly at Jessica. No malice, just precision. Jessica, I said evenly, those rules don't work for your husband, you know. The wine glass in her hand wobbled. She didn't respond, but the silence that followed, it hit the floor harder than any dropped bottle. Rachel's eyes narrowed. Excuse me. I didn't look at her. I just kept my eyes on Jessica. She stood up fast. I need to go. Rachel turned sharply. What? Jess? What is he talking about? But Jessica was already grabbing her coat. Cheeks flushed, words tripping over themselves. I have to go. I'm not. I don't. This is ridiculous. Another woman looked from Jessica to Rachel. Wait, what's going on? I don't know. Rachel hissed, turning back to me. David, what are you doing? I straightened. Setting things right, I said quietly. The door slammed as Jessica fled, and chaos followed. What was that? What does he mean? Did something happen? Rachel stood there, stunned, mouth slightly open, and for the first time in years, she looked cornered. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain. I simply walked past the gathering storm of voices and down the hall to the bedroom, to her closet. I pulled out a suitcase, clicked it open, and started packing. Blouses, jeans, makeup bag, her favorite pair of boots. I folded everything with care, not anger. Behind me, the voices grew louder, fractured now. Accusations, questions, Rachel's sharp tone rising above them all. But I stayed focused. This wasn't revenge, it was release. When I zipped the bag, Rachel appeared in the doorway, flushed and wild-eyed. You're packing my things? She barked. I looked at her for a long moment, then down at the suitcase. I figured it was time, I said simply. You don't get to decide that, she snapped. You don't get to throw me out. I stood. I'm not throwing you out. I'm letting you go. There's a difference. She stared at the bag, then at me, then back again. Her chest rose and fell in sharp little bursts. "You're not the victim here, David," she said through gritted teeth. "I'm not trying to be. You're so dramatic." "Rachel." She stopped. I picked up the suitcase and held it out gently. "You said your body, your rules. Fair. So here's mine. My house, my peace." She didn't take the bag, just stood frozen, lips trembling with things she couldn't say out loud. Not anymore. Behind her, one of her friends called out uncertainly. Another was already leaving. The party had collapsed. I set the bag down at her feet and walked past her toward the front door, stepping over a half-finished wine glass and a broken silence. For once, I didn't look back. The courtroom smelled like old paper and recycled air. I sat beside my attorney, calmly watching Rachel across the aisle. She wore gray, an intentional choice, no doubt. Conservative dress, neat hair, eyes slightly downcast, like she'd been coached to look both wounded and dignified. Her lawyer, a sharp guy in a navy suit with a voice built for radio, stood and addressed the judge. "Your Honor, Mrs. Rhee has endured a marriage marked by emotional abandonment. Her husband, Mr. David Rhee, withdrew from the relationship, refused communication, and created a cold, isolating environment for his wife." I didn't flinch. Rachel tilted her chin just enough to seem fragile. Then came her voice. "David." He stopped seeing me. Not just physically, but emotionally. I begged for connection. I tried, but he was just gone. And when I told him I had health complications that made intimacy hard, he turned it against me. Health complications? That was her angle. The judge turned to me. "Mr. Rhee, your response?" My lawyer rose, but I gently placed a hand on his arm. "I'd like to speak." He sat back down. I stood slowly. My voice was calm, level. "Your Honor, I never walked away from my wife. I was there. I showed up every day. But presence means nothing when someone's already checked out of the relationship." I turned slightly toward Rachel. She said she couldn't be close to me. She said it was medical. I respected that. Then I nodded toward the bench. "But I have evidence suggesting otherwise." Mark stood in the back row, rose with a nod, and stepped forward. My attorney handed over a sealed folder, photos, dates, times. All clean, all legal. The judge flipped through them slowly. Rachel's eyes darted between us, her breathing picking up. I faced her fully now. "And were you healthy enough to have intimacy with someone else, Rachel?" The room went silent. Dead silent. Rachel's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her composure cracked. The tears she'd been holding back spilled out suddenly, as if some dam inside her finally gave. She sank slightly in her seat, sobbing into her hand, not for guilt, but for being exposed. The judge cleared her throat and addressed the room. "Based on this new information, the court recognizes a breach of marital trust, financial and emotional. Custodial preference, asset division, and all further decisions will reflect this." Rachel didn't look up. I sat back down, breathing evenly. It wasn't about winning. It was about finally being seen. It was raining lightly the morning I walked back into the office, the kind of soft, steady rain that made the sidewalks glisten and the city feel slower. I didn't bring an umbrella. Didn't need one. I let it soak into my coat a little, just enough to remind me I was still here, still standing. The glass door slid open with a familiar whoosh, and I stepped into the lobby, nodding at the security guard like I used to every Monday. Only this time, it felt different. This time I wasn't escaping anything. I passed the break room, the same hum of microwaves, same scattered small talk. People glanced up when they saw me. Some nodded politely. Others looked like they didn't know what to say. But then I saw her, Lily. She was at her desk, typing something quickly, her brows slightly knit, focused like always. I approached slowly. "Hey." She looked up, startled. "David." I smiled gently. "Can I steal a minute?" She nodded and stood, smoothing the front of her cardigan. "Of course." We walked into the small meeting room beside reception, empty, quiet, lit with soft overhead light. I took a breath. "I owe you an apology for the way I snapped before I left. That wasn't fair. You didn't deserve it." Lily gave a soft smile. "You were going through something." "That's not an excuse," I said. "But thank you for being patient and for keeping everything together while I was away." There was a brief silence between us, but not the awkward kind, just space. Then I cleared my throat. "I was wondering, when you're free, would you want to grab dinner sometime? Just something casual." No pressure. Her eyes lit up, and this time the smile reached all the way up. "I'd like that," she said simply. I nodded, the warmth in my chest quiet and solid. "Good." She walked back to her desk, and I returned to mine. Later that day, the paperwork would pile up and the meetings would start again. But for now, I sat in my chair, staring out at the wet city beyond the window. Everything looked the same, but I wasn't. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't lost. I was just free. And as I reached into my drawer and pulled out a clean legal pad, I realized something simple and powerful. That chapter was closed, not burned, not shredded, just turned. And ahead of me, quiet, simple, honest, was the beginning of something new. And that was the end of my story. But there's one thing I still think about. Jessica. She walked out that night without defending herself, without a word to Rachel, like the guilt finally caught up to her. Was that her way of choosing the right side, or just running from the wreckage she helped create? Let me know in the comments. Did Jessica do the right thing? And if this story made you feel something real, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stick around.